If you're a fan of Hitchcock movies, you've probably noticed that he uses some elements over and over again. Blondes were the first thing that came to mind for me, but there are plenty of others. Staircases, for example, are used prominently in Notorious, Dial M for Murder, and Vertigo. Trains are another favorite of Hitchcock's, and they appear in North by Northwest, Shadow of a Doubt, and The Lady Vanishes. And perhaps most famously, Hitchcock used images of birds in nearly all of his films, including Psycho, To Catch a Thief, and of course, The Birds. Often these motifs are repeated within the same film and become a type of shorthand for the overall theme of the movie. A great example of this is in the 1951 thriller Strangers on a Train, which, by the way, also has scenes with staircases and trains, and while there aren't very many birds in it, I did find this shot with some ducks. So for those of you who haven't seen Strangers on a Train, here's my quick synopsis of the plot. Two men, Bruno and Guy, meet on a train. Both have someone in their life that they'd like to be rid of. Bruno has an overbearing father, and Guy has an estranged wife who won't give him a divorce. Bruno suggests that they trade murders.
Swap murders?
Each fellow does the other fellow's murder, then there's nothing to connect them. Each one has murdered a total stranger. Like, you do my murder, I do yours.
Guy thinks Bruno is joking, Bruno is 100% serious. The overarching theme of Strangers on a Train is doubles, and that includes crisscrosses, double crosses, and even some intersections. So, for this week's video, I'm going to list the times Hitchcock tapped into the doubles motif in Strangers on a Train. So stick around, this will be fun.
What is a life for two guys? Some people are better off dead.
We get our first double in the opening shot of the film, when a taxi pulls up to the curb. A porter opens the car door and grabs the bag as the passenger pays the cabbie. The very next shot is almost an exact copy, only this time the passenger is also carrying a double set of tennis rackets. The two passengers start walking to the train, trailed by the two porters, converging on each other from different directions like they're mirror images of one another. And right after they enter the station, we cut to a shot of a train cutting across intersecting tracks on its way to the platform. The doubles are about to meet. In the train car, Bruno recognizes Guy and makes a guess as to why Guy is on the train.
I suppose you're going to Southampton for the doubles.
You are a tennis friend.
In this scene, Hitchcock is really playing with intersecting lines. For example, as Guy and Bruno begin their conversation on the train, we see that the blinds are marking Bruno's face with shadowy lines, but Guy is unmarked. Even their clothing features intersecting lines. Several of Guy's ties in Strangers on a Train have a crisscross pattern to them like the one we see here, and Bruno is often seen wearing a pinstripe suit. When Guy pulls out his lighter, we see that it too has a crisscross double on it, two tennis rackets, and the inscription that says A to G, a gift to Guy from his girlfriend Ann Morton. Next up, Bruno calls over a waiter to order some drinks.
Yes, sir.
Scotch and plain water, please. A pair. Doubles.
Did you notice he ordered two drinks that each have two ingredients, and he wants them made as doubles? After the two have moved into Bruno's compartment to have lunch, Bruno outlines his theory of the perfect murder, a theory he refers to twice as a crisscross.
Your wife, my father. Crisscross. What? Crisscross.
When the train finally arrives in Metcalfe, Guy gets off, and we see Hitchcock himself getting on the train, carrying a double bass. In fact, there are two Hitchcocks in this film. Alfred has the cameo we saw here, and his daughter Patricia plays Barbara, Ann's little sister.
Something dreadful's happened, Guy.
Sit down, Barbara.
The town of Metcalfe itself is a double with Washington, D.C. Metcalfe, which is Guy's hometown, represents the typical small town where everyone knows everyone else, while Washington, which is Bruno's hometown, represents the big city where you can be a bit more anonymous. When Guy gets into Metcalfe, he visits his wife so they can go to a lawyer to finalize their divorce, only Miriam has changed her mind, leading to our next reference to a double.
I'm not getting a divorce.
You little double-crosser. I didn't want this divorce, you did.
As the story goes along, Bruno and Guy begin to show similarities and overlap more and more. For example, after Miriam refuses to give Guy the divorce, Guy calls Anne and says he'd like to break Miriam's neck.
I said I could strangle her!
This shot cuts to Bruno at his home, and we see him making a choking motion with his hands. This remote pairing happens again a little later in the film, when even though they're separated, we see them both looking at their watches at the same time. That night, Bruno calls Guy to ask how the meeting with Miriam went, and he learns it didn't go as well as planned.
Oh, so she double-crossed you? Are you going to see her again?
After Bruno's father threatens to have him sent away for treatment, Bruno decides to put his theory in motion, and he takes the train to Metcalfe, where he finds Miriam's address, and he follows her and her new boyfriends to the local amusement park. Bruno follows her onto an island in the middle of the lake, where he strangles her.
Is your name Miriam?
Why, yes. How did you...
An act we see as a doubled reflection in Miriam's glasses. Later on, as Bruno is pressuring Guy to fulfill his end of the deal, he meets Anne's little sister, Barbara. The similar faces and the glasses lead Bruno to flashback to her double, Miriam.
Is your name Miriam?
A feeling that leads Bruno to almost strangling another woman at a party when he sees Barbara standing behind the woman.
Mr. Anthony, Mr. Anthony, help, help, help! Somebody come, quick! Help! Somebody come, quick, bring some water!
And towards the end of the movie, their roles have reversed in some ways. For example, we see Bruno on the train lighting a cigarette for another passenger, just as Guy did for him at the start of the movie. We also see Guy heading back into the train station, in a duplication of Bruno's arrival in the opening shot. And once on the train, we see another pair of passengers tap each other's shoes, just like Guy did to Bruno at the start of the movie. And once back in Metcalfe, we see Guy trailing Bruno into the amusement park, just as Bruno followed Miriam earlier in the movie. And finally, in the last shot of the film, we see a reverend asking Guy if he's Guy Haynes, just like in the opening scenes. But this time, Guy isn't going to let that process start all over again. And those are just some of the doubles Hitchcock has placed throughout this movie. Others we could add to the list include the two respectable and influential fathers, both Bruno's and Anne's, Miriam's two boyfriends who took her to the amusement park. There are two little boys who have key scenes during the two visits to the amusement park. There are two sets of detectives in two different cities. And there's the two women at the party who enjoy thinking of a way to commit the perfect crime, just like Bruno did with Guy. Well, there you have it. That's my list of all the doubles and crisscrosses I could find in Strangers on a Train. If I missed one that you spotted, please let me know in the comments below. And if you're a fan of other motifs that are carried throughout another movie, I'd love to hear about those as well. Until next time, thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of A Million Movies.